I took out a $50,000 loan that I then turned around into this, using funnels and everything to sell the courses, sold the courses, and from that 50,000 made 170, right?
Wow.
And so there's always opportunity, and I think you just, you have to look for it. And so just being ready for those types of things, thinking outside the box, I think is very helpful.
A PhD in biochemistry, 10 U.S. patents, a career in biomedical research and defense science. None of that is what you'd expect to hear before the words grant writing firm. But Dr. Arlene Siller isn't a conventional story. In 2018, her body literally forced her to stop acute adrenal exhaustion from years of pouring herself into a career she loved while holding together a life that was quietly breaking apart. And in that stillness, a business was born. Since launching Ascend Nonprofit and Business Solutions in 2019, she's helped organizations secure over $188 million in awarded grant funding. She built the company she wished had existed, flexible, woman-led, built for mission-driven organizations that are chronically underfunded despite doing life-changing work. So today, we're getting into the real lab work, how she built a firm, what it costs, what she got wrong, or what it takes to build something that serves others and actually sustains you at the same time. This is the Execution Lab. Let's work.
Ideas are cheap. Execution pays. Welcome to the Execution Lab. This ain't talk, this ain't theory. We don't wait till the path get clear. If you got a dream and you serious, clock in, yeah, we execute in here. Plan it, test it, break it, rebuild.
So Dr. Siller, welcome to the Execution Lab.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Look, I have to start with the background because I'm going to be honest, it genuinely caught me off guard. A PhD in biochemistry, research at the U.S. Army Institute of Surgical Research, 10 issued U.S. patents. How does someone with that resume end up founding a grant writing firm? You got to explain that to me.
Completely by accident. Nothing was planned. When I was in high school, I wanted to become a medical doctor. And then when I was in college, I did some internships, one with an orthopedist, one with an asthma doctor. And I figured out at that point, being a doctor was not for me, for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah.
But I was already a junior in college, so nobody wants to start over at that point, right? So I was already getting a degree in biology and chemistry. So I added a semester and put psychology on there. I figured I'd get more jobs through psychology. So I go on and find a position with Southwest Research Institute, and I'm doing biomedical research, and I found this field that I really, really loved. And so went back to school, got my PhD in biochemistry, still in the whole space of biomedical research, and then moved on to the Institute of Surgical Research to continue that. But it was really challenging for a woman in science, period. Science is a very defensive field.
Yeah.
It is very male dominated. And then on top of that, to be in a military environment made it even more so. And there were a variety of challenges that happened with that. I was also at the point of starting my family. And so those challenges made it very difficult as a young mom and trying to navigate that space. So at some point, I knew that I needed to find something else. I wasn't expecting to leave the field of science, but I was located in San Antonio. There's not a lot of opportunities for science at the time in San Antonio. And so I decided that maybe I needed a career switch, but I really wasn't sure what that was because science was my whole world.
Mhm.
I was good at it. I loved doing it. I love problem solving, and that's what you're doing in science. But I went to a company to help me with just what I thought was going to be redoing my resume because a science resume is drastically different from any other resume that you're going to use to submit to a field. So ended up in this organization that helped me with interviewing skills, but they also did a skills assessment that would help me figure out what that next step was going to be. And grant writing came to the surface. So this was like, what? To me, I didn't know anybody did this for a living, right? I've always done grant writing because in science, you have to secure funding in
Mhm.
order to be able to do your science. Whoever gets the money gets to do the work, right? So if you're working in someone else's lab, they were successful at securing funding and you're working on their brainchild, not yours
Yeah.
necessarily. So when I looked back at my science career, my science was always funded. And so I guess at that point, it was like a light went off and thought, okay, maybe I'm pretty good at fundraising.
Yeah.
And so with that, that's how I stumbled into grant writing. And then I went on my very first interview, and the organization was one that you and I used to work for. And it was just a very different interview. I mean, it was a crazy interview. We were pitted up against each other. I really didn't know that much about this particular field. Of course, I read up on it for the interview and things like that. But we clicked and they decided to take a chance on me and I took a chance on them. We each gave each other this 90-day kind of trial because I wasn't sure if it was going to work for me. And in the first 60 days, I secured $1 million HUD grant for them. So at that point, they were like, "You're not going anywhere."
Right.
And I stayed there for 4.5 years, raised $35 million for them. So I figured out that my skill sets in grant writing did transfer from, military medicine, biochemistry, biotech, and academia over to the nonprofit sector. And working for a nonprofit was just what I needed. It was very cathartic. It was very healing for me from everything else that I had experienced up until that point. And I just found a group of people to serve that I really loved because they were out doing great work. At this point, it was with small businesses. And then I experienced health challenges, which weren't a result of this job in particular. It was years of being stressed,
Yeah.
not listening to my body, pushing my body. Um, I used to frequently use the phrase, "I'll sleep when I'm dead,"
Right.
kind of thing. So it was very much type A personality, go, go, go. There wasn't a challenge that I couldn't take on, but the stress was really catching up with me. And I woke up one day and couldn't get out of bed. And that stayed that way for about 2 months, where it was just a challenge just to get up and take a shower. I had to take a leave of absence from work, and my brain was still going, but my body was not. And that was very,
Yeah.
very frustrating. But it was during that time that for me, I believe God was just making me still so I could listen.
Yes. So you're in the hospital in 2018, and you said something. You said that in the stillness, God revealed His vision. So I want you to kind of unpack that for our listeners because what you're describing is a moment of complete collapse that really became a launch pad.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like when you realize the shutdown was actually a setup?
It's a process, honestly, because there was a tremendous amount of frustration and anger. My brain was still going, trying to do stuff. I was still at the beginning trying to push my body, but my body
Mhm.
was like, "Nope, we're not doing this. The only thing that you can do is open your eyes today."
Wow.
Like, and that's it. And so, after a while, I think for me, I just sort of succumbed to the situation and, was praying and trying to figure out, like, why am I here? And it wasn't until I was completely still that there was this idea that I needed to do this for others, not just for the organization that I was working for. And it was a challenge for me because the organization that I was working for, I loved. I loved the
Yeah.
people. I loved the culture. I loved the mission of what we were doing. So the idea that I would leave that for something that was unknown was scary because I was working in other environments prior to that that were higher paying, toxic environments, these really, really just challenging cultural, gender, types of
Mhm.
things. Um, I'm an out of the box kind of person, thinker. I'm not your standard employee. So imagine me being like that in a military environment. I was always in trouble.
Yeah.
Always. I was always sent to HR, being written up. Somebody was calling me in to have a conversation, all those kinds of things. And so when I started to look back on that, what I found is when I had looked at those situations like negatively, it actually was pushing me toward this idea of entrepreneurship. This was a space where being an out of the box thinker, not being a conventional employee really pays off. Like you
Yeah.
get rewarded here, where in those situations, it was stay inside the box, stay inside the lines, follow the rules. There's a 12-step process. You don't deviate from that. We don't want to know how you feel. We don't want to know how what you're thinking. It's just do this job and that's it. And my brain, I was forcing myself to be in a situation that really was not in alignment with um, what I was called to do or what my soul needed.
Wow. Oh, you launched Ascend
Mhm.
in March of 2019.
Yes.
That's just months after the medical crisis. And then we all know what happened in 2020.
Mhm.
COVID hit. It
Yes.
hit.
So I'm like, was this a good decision?
Like, well, now you did say, you said it was a revelation and a validation because you had been building virtually from day one.
Yeah.
And so, what was that moment like when the whole sector suddenly understood your model? Like, hey, I've been here. What did that feel like?
It felt fantastic while
Yeah.
everybody was scrambling to figure out Zoom, how people were gonna work from
Yes.
home, how we were gonna ship computers to everybody, what was, their work desk gonna look like, what was the background gonna look like, is it somebody's kitchen, 5 kids running around,
Yeah.
like, all of that. We had all of that worked out, so when I decided that I wanted to start Ascend, I knew that I did not want a physical space, a brick and
Mhm.
mortar. I really wanted and at first, Ascend was just supposed to be me, right? It was just, I'm going to be a consultant. I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to do it my way. But before I even filed for an EIN, I had 3 customers. Word
Wow.
of mouth got out. When I was working for the other organization, people were always asking me if I was happy there. Was I looking to move? I was being poached very frequently, or asked to be poached, I guess I should say. And so once people found out that I was doing this on my own, then there were people who offered me jobs and then people who gave me consulting contracts.
Wow.
So I started to have more work than I could take on. And for me, I just, even though I loved the organization that I was working for, being a single mom was really challenging. Just getting your kids off to school, high school, middle school starts at 2 different times. You still
Yeah.
have to be at work at 8 a.m. There's soccer practice, there's crazy hat day, crazy sock day, all the other stuff that goes with, raising kids. And I remembered that the most stressful times were the transportation, home to school, home to work, sitting in traffic,
Yes.
feeling like I'm wasting time. There's nothing, that I can really do. And there's only so much music, podcasts, books that you can listen to. You're still just not doing anything.
Yeah.
And it was very frustrating for me. So I said, I want to cut that out of my day. I'm still gonna work. I'm still, gonna go at my full ability. My kids still have to get off to school, but the difference is, I'm not stressed with all of this stuff, and so I
Yeah.
took that stress out, and I decided that Ascend would be that kind of place where it was going to be 100% remote and virtual. I wanted people from, any walk of life that needed this type of environment to know that something was out there for them. My focus really was on women. At the time, we don't just hire women, but we do predominantly appeal to women because of our model. And, women are either caring for their children, their elderly parents, both. Some people have medical issues where the standard 8 to 5 just does not work for them. And then, we also tend to appeal to another segment, which is military spouses. So when I was in the military environment and got to meet a lot of the wives of the men that I worked with, bright, brilliant women, and their careers were not advancing a lot of times, not always, because they were moving from place to place and it would be like a lateral move, not
Mhm.
something going
Right.
upward. And so, that was another group that I presented this business to was, people who could grant write, but who needed that flexibility. And so when COVID hit, we were ready. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just we were operating like that for a year. And I, you know, I took this, everybody was doing kind of like online learning and challenges at that time during COVID, remember? And there was this 30-day challenge where they were bringing on these speakers from all walks of life, whether it was like spiritual, religious, family, finance, all these business, all these different things. And I remember one of the gentlemen saying, somebody gets rich during times like this, right?
Yeah.
And you just have to see the opportunity or create the opportunity. So while we did see a little bit of a decline in the number of contracts that we were getting in grant writing, what I decided to do was when we are meeting with potential clients, there's some people that or organizations that cannot afford our services yet. And so I had this idea for creating courses that they could take and learn what they needed to learn to set up their nonprofit. And they weren't going to pay the huge cost of utilizing our services.
Yeah.
And so I pivoted during that time to start those courses. And I, took advantage of the 0% interest loans that were available during that time.
Yeah.
I took out a $50,000 loan that I then turned around into this, using funnels and
Right.
everything to sell the courses, sold the courses, and from that 50,000 made 170, right?
Wow.
And so there's always opportunity, and I think you just, you have to look for it. And so just being ready for those types of things, thinking outside the box, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, the listeners to this podcast and in this community are individuals similar to you. You really made the leap. You like you made the leap. A lot of them, still working jobs and kind of got it on the side. They're working it. One of the biggest things, and you mentioned it in your answers that uh, businesses struggle with is pricing. And you named that you said that underpricing your budget, underpricing your product is a big mistake.
Mhm.
And you said something that really stuck out with me. You said undervaluing your work doesn't just affect your business, it limits the quality of the service you can deliver. Explain the connection for someone who's charging too little right now.
Yeah. So, from all of the business courses that I took, I was in every free webinar that I could get my hands on because I wasn't an experienced business owner. I don't come from a legacy of business owners where I'm learning this from father, mother, uncle,
Yeah,
whatever. So I know the business of grant writing, but I don't know the business of selling it,
yeah,
right? So I had to learn that. So I took everything that I could. I was doing my own social media marketing, I had to learn all of that. That's not part of what you receive in a biochemistry background at
yeah.
all. So I took everything that I could and was just trying to absorb it all. But in that, I mean, you have to be ready, and be prepared you have to surround yourself with all these different people that can help you to get there, and to absorb and to ask the questions. And so, that whole process is just you've got to commit to it. And
Yeah.
so, for me, um, what I really, saw this one, I'm great at grant writing, but it was a low overhead business to get started, right? And so, with that, the business was easy from that perspective, but I still had to sell it to others and I had to sell this idea to others.
And not on price, you mentioned something else. You said the unexpected sacrifice wasn't time or money, it was the mental space. And entrepreneurship is hard.
Mhm.
And you said, you could be at dinner with your family, and the business is still running in your head. You wake up at 2 a.m. with a client concern. How do you actually protect your energy now? Because you said this is something that you're still working on intentionally, and a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this. I left my job, I'm in my job, and I'm starting a business. I started my business to have freedom, but it feels like I got less freedom now because I had one boss, now I got a whole bunch of bosses, which are my customers. So how are you still working through that?
Yeah, so, one of the thing I had to create a it is a home-based business for me, so I had to be very intentional about creating a separate space with closed doors, letting my family know, like, in here is Ascend, like,
Yeah,
don't come in with family issues. If you need me, I step outside.
yeah,
Making sure that I turn my phone off at certain times. I record notes on my phone so that something, if I have a great idea at 9 o'clock at night when I'm at dinner with my friends,
yeah,
I still record it, but I don't act on it until it's the appropriate time. I frequently would talk to my husband about the business too. And so, he's always been a very, huge supporter of mine. But I also had to tell him, when you come into the bedroom, we're no longer having conversations about Ascend at
yeah,
all. Like, this
yeah.
is my time, this is my space. So being very, deliberate about it. And then going back to the question about pricing, I think that um, I feel like it happens a little bit more for women, and the statistics do show that, where we undervalue our services. And so I
Mhm.
think one of the things I did was I looked up those businesses that I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah,
Right. So there's a couple of other grant writing firms that are out, in the country. And, these other business owners had been doing it, 10 years, 13 years, and so I really took a look at their website, their services, their
that's
social
good.
media, and I got a great idea of what the services they provide versus what I could at the time,
Yeah,
and got a really good idea there from their stuff, but also going on Indeed, going on Upwork, freelancers, figuring out how were people pricing themselves, right? And when you do that research, you do see a difference. Men tend to put themselves at, say, I'm just using an example, $100 an hour, and you would see a lot of the women at $20 and $40 an hour. And so I was making an inventory of what are the services that I could provide, and then who else was providing something similar and what were their rates. And that really helped me figure out what my rate should be. And then the other thing is, you have to tell yourself, I'm not going to give discounts to family and friends. They shouldn't ask that of me either because,
getting
well, I'm starting to
yes.
I'm not gonna hire family and friends because this
Yeah,
is a business, it's not a hobby, and unless they really and you really can understand how to have that separate dynamic of, tell you and be honest, my sister has worked for me, right? I don't think everybody can work with their sister, but my
yeah,
sister and I have a really good understanding at work. We are, employees, colleagues, I've been her supervisor, all those kinds of things. So it just depends on the individuals, but I think for the most part, don't do any of those things. Then the other thing is, I had people that would call for our services and be like, "Well, you're serving nonprofits. Why aren't you doing this for free?" Well, I've got to pay for my family too. And so you have to be convicted about those things. You have to know your worth. When you do the research, it helps you to really, figure out, okay, I should be charging this hourly rate, or, if you do retainers or however you do it, right? But definitively for the quality of the work that I do and the services that we provide, this is the rate. We evaluate that every year. And so, the other component is when you don't price yourself at the right rate, if you're going to hire other people, you can't hire them because then you can't pay them what they're
that's
worth
right. Yeah,
and they're going to go somewhere else. The other thing is that you can't reinvest in your business, and that's something that you have to do. There's so much technology out there. It's pretty affordable, but it still costs you.
yeah,
And so if you're not able to afford, some of those other things like technology, then you're not necessarily working the most efficiently, effectively, or doing the best for your customers. And so you really do need to price yourself, not just for yourself and what you bring home for your family. Like for me, that was what I was making before, was like, that was my baseline. I wasn't going to go
mhm,
lower than that.
yeah,
Right. I had to at least make that because that's the job I'd left. And then we have to make more than that, right? So we can bring other people on and come back in and reinvest.
Yeah, I think that's so good, and you really just gave a masterclass in pricing, and so thank you, thank you for that. I think a lot of time entrepreneurs um, have a false assumption that if my price is lower, then I'm going to get the business. But sometimes the individual that have the resource to pay, they don't always go for the lower price
No.
because in their mind they say, okay, if it's cheaper, it has to be less quality, has to
Yeah.
be a lower quality. And I tell entrepreneurs all the time, it's okay for you to say no if somebody don't like your price. And I think you mentioned it earlier when you said you created the courses because some people just couldn't afford your services.
Right.
Right.
Yep,
So that is
there were
smart.
some people that really just couldn't afford it, so we
Yeah,
found another way to meet them where they are. The other thing too is there were people that we've said no to because, they're like, "Can we cut this? Can we cut that?" Well, we
yeah,
can't cut that because you don't really understand what it means for me to be
yeah,
successful for you in fundraising when there's parts of your business that are not gonna be competitive from a fundraising perspective, right? So,
yeah,
I'm not gonna cut those things. I get that you have a budget, like, I understand that, but we're not ready to work together right now.
yeah.
And then there's some that just want the lowest price, right? No matter what. And the interesting thing is, I found that the majority of them came back after they accepted the lower offer of the grant writer who was 20 bucks an hour, left them high and dry, didn't submit stuff,
Yep.
submitted things incompletely, started to work on something, then said, I'm going on vacation, here you go. And they missed a deadline. So I'd say it all works out in the end. And if you just definitively know who you are, what you provide. But I think that's also another thing. You have to be honest with yourself because sometimes, when we're hiring for grant writers, we get someone who's like, I want $100 an hour. And it's like, you've been grant writing for 2 years.
Yeah.
And we ask for like a sample grant, right? And clearly this is not $100 an hour type of work, right?
Right.
So also be honest with yourself. You may get one or two clients that agree to that dollar amount, but they're not going to stay when you can't deliver, right? So you have to be honest with yourself about that, but do your research to really figure out where you should be.
Awesome. I want to talk about this $188 million in awarded grant funding since 2019. That's a huge number. But when I see that, I see programs running, I see staff hired, I see families being served. Can you put a face to that number, or tell me about? You don't have to give the name, about an organization that got funding through a sin, and what have they been able to do with that? Did that grant make possible for them?
Yeah, I mean, the faces are pretty much all of us, right? So we
Yeah,
don't only just grant write for nonprofits, we grant write for cities and counties. So we go after contracts for them as well. So it's everything from your highways to trees that are being put in at a park. It's a new
mhm,
park that's been installed that you and your family are enjoying on the weekend. From a nonprofit perspective, it's the line of people that you see getting food from the food bank. It's people getting immunized during COVID, right? A lot of those pop ups that were happening in all of our communities, tended to be from grant funds that were out there. So it touches, I mean, that's the beauty of, I think, what we do is, it touches everybody in the community in one way or another because it's health and human services, it's education, it's money for, a 35-year-old single mother to get childcare,
yeah,
to get, scholarship money to also work with a nonprofit that when her tire blows, she can go get her tire
mhm,
replaced. Or it's a nonprofit auto mechanic that does, work at reduced price or on a sliding scale or free in some cases. So, I mean, it's all of those things. It's people who, we saw this a lot too after COVID. People who are in the hospitality industry who got really, really hit by this.
yeah,
So it's the programs that we saw come after this, where if you wanted to go back to school and get a certificate or get, accreditation in this thing or go back and get a degree, we help our clients provide the dollars to fund those types of initiatives, right?
Yeah.
It's affordable housing, which is an issue in a lot of big cities, right? And so, we're working with organizations where we're making affordable housing affordable, available, securing the land, the development of the places, the whole idea behind aging in place so that people don't have to be displaced as they get older from the people they know in their community. It's all of those things. So we're general grant writers and we write for all of the sector. So there's some grant writers that are specific to education or to the arts or something like that. That's not what we do. We write for all different sectors.
Yeah.
And so our clients can be education institutions, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, charter schools, alternatives to education. Our clients are nonprofits working, with various, groups, after school programs, battered and abused women. I mean, like it runs the full gamut. So, we're headquartered in San Antonio, but we operate on a national basis. And so, the work that we do touches millions of people.
You mentioned your business coach, Christy O'Connor, for introducing you to EOS and real accountability. What changed in your business once you had someone holding you accountable to what you said you were going to do? Because let's be honest. Let's be honest. Most entrepreneurs or most people in general, most people that's hard. That's hard to have someone say, "Hey, I'm going to do this and make sure you hold me to it." Because we like to sometimes just kind of relax and procrastinate in
Mhm.
our relaxation and and say we're going to do something, but not execute on it. And so, what changed in your business when you had someone to hold you accountable to say, okay, you said you were going to do this. Have you done it? What changed?
Well, one, I was paying somebody, right? So that's money that's coming out of, your business pocket. I knew we only had an engagement for a certain period of time. She wasn't going to be an indefinite coach. She exposed us to EOS, but the big thing for us was that we actually implemented it, and we still to this day use every aspect. We have a scorecard. We have our L10 meetings. So the accountability is no longer with her. She was our coach like 2 years ago, and I
Yeah.
just love her for exposing us to it. But the accountability is to each other. And so we have meetings on the same day, same time, 90 minutes. We're accountable to each other because as we're going through the things that we said was going to be accomplished by this date, myself and my team included have to sit there and say, DeAndre, I didn't get to that this week.
Yeah.
Why not? Right? And so it goes both ways. I have to generate sales for this business, right? So when we're, looking at our scorecard and the revenue, we just had this happen last week. Our revenue was the lowest it had been since the beginning of this year, right?
Hmm.
Not cause for an alarm, but there's a flag there, right? So one, you need to know your numbers all the time. But then two, now, what does that say to me when I am the head salesperson, right? So I'm like, okay, we need to start, talking to our clients about additional services. We need to start, putting ourselves out there a little bit more. We need to change our messaging in terms of social media. We need to start doing all of those things, right? So it happens one week and we see it because we're meeting week to week, right?
Hmm.
But now I'm accountable to them and they know the number two, right? So I can't sit here and come at them 3 months from now. Well, our revenue has been down for months. They didn't know that if I didn't communicate, right? But now we're meeting weekly. And the difference is now they understand it, they know where it's coming from, and you get input from them where they say, what can I do to help? Right? Because it is all of us. And so th- I think, I wish I would have had EOS in my first year. This business would be so different if I did. It is a wonderful system. If you can invest in it, invest in it. I was fortunate enough to secure 2 grants for it. So I sent myself and my COO for training. And so, there are grant opportunities sometimes. It was a national bank that, you submitted a grant and then you were, if you got awarded, you got to be in the program.
Mm-hmm.
It can be expensive by itself, but I'm telling you, it will make your team so much more efficient, effective. We evaluate each other, we evaluate the entire team, we evaluate our clients as well. So this also helps us decide what clients do we need to exit,
Mm-hmm.
because they're costing us too much time. They question then your invoices, but they're not considering how their behavior contributed to some of the increased costs on the invoices. They're not responsive. They email when they want to. They don't give us what we need in order to, really help them be successful in fundraising. So I think that accountability goes all the way around, and it makes decision making of when you need to let someone go or when you need to exit a client that much easier. And then everyone's on board with it too,
Yeah.
which is because we're seeing it week after week. It's not like it's a problem that's been festering that you didn't know about because I didn't bring it to you 3 months ago when we had a problem, right? You're hearing
Yeah.
about it on a weekly basis where then we can say, it's been 4 weeks and this has not improved. And we've had 3 meetings on this subject. It's time to let him go, let her go, let the client go, whatever it might be. And you make the decision and you move forward.
Yeah, that's good. And I was going to ask you a question on alignment, but you just described it. But I do want to bring out something that you mentioned. You said that you define success 3 ways. You said impact, alignment again, and legacy. Now, most people just pick one of those. What does it mean to hold all three together, and can they ever be in tension with each other? Impact, alignment, and legacy.
No, I don't think so. Not in the area that we work in. So, putting all of these things in place helps us be intentional. So we don't bring on clients that we don't really feel that we can successfully raise funds for.
Hmm.
So I'm not the type of grant writer that you're going to find, and no shade on anybody on Upwork, right? Like we all have to start somewhere, and there's great grant writers on there. But there's some people that can write a grant for you, right? And they're going to write to the best of their ability, but it's not a fundable grant because your organization is not fundable, right?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of things that go into that. So when we are meeting with a potential client and we can tell based on their answers that there's a lot of chaos in the organization, there's a lot of things that maybe got started but not completed. The organization does not seem healthy. We know we can't successfully grant write for you because it's not just what's written into the grant application. There's all these different attachments that they ask for, one of which is your financials. Your financials are done by your CFO, a bookkeeping company, and a CPA, all these other ones, right? We didn't have anything to do with that. But if
Yeah.
there's red flags in terms of your numbers, you're not going to get funded because funders are looking at how can you handle the money that I'm about to give you for your mission, right? And so if
Yeah.
your numbers aren't good, there's nothing that we can do about that. So we evaluate the whole organization before they become a client. So that's one of the ways that we have that accountability, that impact as part of it. And, the legacy is once we're securing funds for our clients, like we see the transformation that happens in the people that they serve and happens in the organization. So we were working, with an organization mainly female led, not, it wasn't like just intentional, but
Hmm.
women of color. And not only sometimes when you're working with women of color and they're working for a nonprofit, they tend to live in that community too, which means their children are there, their siblings are there, their parents are there. So it's not just work for them, it's their community, right?
Hmm.
And so this organization's doing great work, led by women of color, and these women are killing themselves to get this work done. Now they're doing great work, but it is coming at a cost. Some of
Yeah.
them were experiencing health issues, hadn't taken a real vacation. They're working on vacation, they're working on holidays, all those kinds of things. So they needed funding to really start hiring people, to start doing their own professional development, to really start to, their roles and responsibilities were very fluid. And
Mhm.
so they needed to really define those types of things. They needed to change their mindset about a lot of these things. and we helped them raise the funds that helped them get there. And so now when I see them on Facebook and, somebody's in Jamaica, on the beach, having a good time, not working, that makes me happy. That's a legacy thing there where we've changed not only their lives in terms of helping them raise the funds, they're doing great work. We just had to help them get it all together, right? And then put it in front of the right funders, but they're also changing the lives of the people that they work with because they do workforce development, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that particular program has 10 years of research where they actually showed that they move people from a low income bracket to a middle income bracket. And 10 years, they've been able to follow the children of those people. And the trajectory is completely different from where they all started from. So that's what legacy, alignment, and impact mean for me.
Wow, that's big, and not only what you do for businesses and organizations, you've grown from a solopreneur to a team of contract grant writers, people of
Mhm,
different ages, different backgrounds, career phases. You describe like that's a success.
mhm.
And so what did it actually feel like the first time you saw a woman return to meaningful work through sin and rediscover her confidence? What did that feel like?
You're gonna make me get all choked up, but it's amazing, honestly, because I feel like oftentimes as women, and I'm always going to come from that perspective, but
Yeah.
um, we put our own dreams and things on hold for our family, and so when I see women have an outlet where they get to use their brain, they get to think about strategy, they get to use their skill set, and still be able to do those things and not feel the guilt, the shame, staying up late at night, always feeling like you're coming behind, you just can't catch up. Like all of those things make a difference. And then when I also see that because of the way that we work and the work that we do, so we work with nonprofits of all different sizes, right? We work for cities and counties, so huge budgets, right? Hundreds and thousands of employees. So our clients are sort of all over. They're in all different sectors. They're all over the US, and we write for funders at different levels. So government, federal, state, city, county, corporation, foundation. So when you work for us, you maybe in the morning might be working for a nonprofit in Cincinnati, that has an after school program. In the afternoon, you're doing workforce development in Houston, right? And then tomorrow you're writing about trees in Colorado,
Yeah.
right? So the variety that you get from us makes you a very well-rounded grant writer. So when I also see them leave us and either start their own business or secure this position that they would have never been able to attain, and now they're earning, great income for themselves and for their family, like that just, I mean, it's an amazing feeling because this isn't for me. I'm meant to, perpetuate this skill. And that's one of the things that's really important for me. So one of the other things is that this field of fundraising, grant writing, and the nonprofit sector has for a couple of years been seeing a decline in terms of the number of employees and people entering the field. Grant writers are on the decline. We had a lot leave after COVID. We have a lot of boomers that have left, and we have not done a really good job as a sector to bring in the next generation. And so the other thing too is that when we do find that there are schools that have master's programs and in nonprofit management, and they have a grant writing course. What they submit to us is not a grant, it's a 2-page Canva document. So
Oh,
they're
wow.
not getting the proper training either. And then they go and secure a job, at a nonprofit and they're unsuccessful in fundraising, which means this nonprofit is not operating at its optimal level because they don't have the right funds to do that. So one of the things that I've started and I'm still working on it and need to complete is I want to do an apprenticeship program, especially for women and people of color, because not a lot of people know about this work in this field. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, I've never heard of that. I never knew anybody did that, and the idea of it, is very appealing to them. And so I want to create, a Department of Labor apprenticeship program where people get paid to learn how to do this.
Yes, sir.
And, we charge clients for the work that they're doing, and then we place people in positions as well, so that when nonprofits are looking for a grant writer, it's not just a job description on Indeed. They can, come to our program and see these people have real world training in all these different areas and have successfully fundraised, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm really interested in. So that's also the legacy component for me.
So, for a nonprofit leader listening right now, who has been writing grants for themselves, struggling, and wondering, is there a better way? What's the first thing they should do, and what does the entry point into working with Ascend look like?
Go to our website. So it's ascendnbs.com. You can read all about us. We have case studies. You'll learn about the process, all of those things. But there's a survey on there, and you fill out the survey, and that will lead to our first free consultation where we get, a really good idea of where your organization is. What is the type of help that you need? So I'm saying grant writing, but that's really, it's a full cycle. So we do grant research, we do the writing itself once we find the grant opportunities. That's what grant research is. And then we also help you post award. So, one of the things that we started to notice was we'd help our clients secure a grant, and then they wouldn't turn in reports to the funder. And so when the grant came up again, we couldn't apply because they never turned in their reports. So they weren't being compliant, right? So, one is you got to find the grants, then you got to write good grants, but then you got to keep them. And so that was the third component that we brought in 2 years ago when I brought in Daniela. She has compliance experience, so that we could help our clients with that process. We're very, systems and process oriented, and we do a lot of technology as well. So that survey that you fill out goes into, a Monday.com form. We
Mhm.
evaluate, your organization when we meet with you. We talk to you about those things, and then we find out what you need, and we can submit a proposal based on your budget and your actual needs.
Awesome. Well, definitely. Thank you so much for coming on with us. So, how do they follow you on social media? What are where you guys located?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We have a YouTube channel,
Okay.
and we do a lot of free training every other Friday. We also have LinkedIn Lives, so you can
Nice.
see that that's free too. That's at 10:30 Central Standard Time every other Friday. We're on LinkedIn as well, so you can find us there. And then on our website, we do a lot of training out in the community, and we post all of that on our social media. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's, there's a small fee just
Mhm.
depending on, who we're working with and those types of things. But we have a lot of free training material that's on our YouTube channel. So check that out because last year we also did a series where we brought in other nonprofit serving consultants.
Mhm.
Because one of the things is nonprofits tend to be small, not all of them, but tend to be small. And so it's difficult sometimes for them to get out in the community and learn who's kind of doing the work. So we brought specific people onto our LinkedIn Lives and then posted those on our YouTube channel so that you could learn, not all CPAs are created equal for a nonprofit. You need to know what to look for in a CPA so that you make sure that your numbers are correct because your financials are so important. Or, marketing and communications people, you want someone that really understands your clients, the nonprofit sector, all those kinds of things. So we brought all of those experts on too to talk about what they do for the sector and how they can help people. So tons of tremendous resources on our YouTube channel. And then, on social media, we also post grant opportunities.
Nice. Okay, and we'll definitely link that below in the description. So make sure you check that out. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Hey guys, if you're still on here with us, appreciate you hanging on here to the end. Make sure you check out the links below to follow Ascend and everything they're doing, the work that they're doing down below. Thank you so much. Until next time, go get it.
Ideas are cheap, execution pays. Welcome to the execution lab. This ain't talk, this ain't theory. We don't wait till the path get clear. If you got a dream and you serious, clock in, yeah, we execute in here. Plan it, test it, break it, rebuild.